Advocate De Silva attempted to prove to the court that Mariette had indeed acted upon someone's influence. If he could prove this, he could have argued extenuating circumstances and saved her life. Alice Mochwe recommended that South African advocate Brian Spilk, an expert on human rights, become involved in Mariette's clemency application.
The approach that I would have adopted would have been to go into the personal circumstances and in particular the issue of her own personality and whether it was a dominant personality or personality that sought to please, and take it from there, having regard to the overall dynamics of the case. There was a hint in De Silva's argument before the Court of Appeal that she had been under the influence of her husband.
Would it be fair to say that you felt that there was too much interference from outsiders in the Bosch case?
Unfortunately, I must say yes. It was most disconcerting because I think had it been appreciated that the roles that Alice wished to play and I was volunteering, if there were no funds, and I made that quite plain.
One somehow can't help wondering whether the story might have had a different ending. Had Brian and Alice had access to Mariette before that fatal Friday, if the legal team had given them access to Mariette?
In the meantime, Mariette Bosch had been locked up on death row. She'd lost an enormous amount of weight and had literally wasted away in her solitary cell. Did Mariette fear for her pending execution? Her single cell had a small, walled-in courtyard. She had only a mattress to sleep on. What did Mariette think about when she stared through those prison bars? Many say Mariette became a born-again Christian in prison, and that she'd made peace with her fate. Mrs. Martha Rampa, wife of Pastor Opa Rampa of the World of Christ Ministries in Gaborone, acted as Mariette's spiritual counselor during her imprisonment in Botswana, and was one of the last people to have seen her alive.
Martha, you got to know Mariette Bosch very well towards the end of her life, and you were her spiritual advisor for the last 12 months when she was in prison. What sort of person was she like?
She was very friendly. She was very understanding when I talked to her about surrendering her life to Jesus. Within that 12 months that we built a close relationship, and I loved her so much.
Do you think it's possible for a person like Mariette to have done such a deed?
I wouldn't know, because I never actually asked her whether she did that or not. She just one of the days volunteered to tell me that she didn't do it.
It seems that she had no idea that she was going to be executed soon after that.
I doubt she did, because she would always tell me how she felt, even when fear will grip her, and I believe she would have told me if she knew.
And yet she was apparently very emotional when you saw her on the last Wednesday before.
When we pray, we will hold hands together, including the prison officers, and we will pray. And that morning, she kept asking me, "Are you coming back next week?" I said, "I've always told whether I was going to make it or not, but every time I'm here, why are you so concerned?" And she kept saying, "Please come back, please come back." When we were praying, as usual, I said, "Let's hold hands together." And I still remember very well, I held her with one on my left hand. And when I began to pray, she really held onto me very tight and was crying, very unusual.
Do you think she was afraid?
I wouldn't say, because I always ask her, I said, "Are you scared to die?" Every time when you think of this, do you feel afraid? And she will tell me, not really, but she's thinking of her children. She said, I would love to continue life to see my children also growing.
Saturday morning, the 31st of March 2002, Mariette Bosch Wolmarans was hanged by the Botswana government. Her family was only notified the following Monday morning. Her attorneys heard the news on the radio.
Why do you think she was executed so swiftly?
A number of things, but one of the major ones was the international pressure. We were receiving calls as well. There was a group from Italy called Hands Off Cain, which we'd never heard of before. And they contacted us. They wanted to know about Mariette Bosch. And I reminded them that there were 2 Southern Africans on death row, one black and one white.
That's right.
And they were not interested in Kobedi, whom, as you know, whose case is still going on now. It's still going on. All they wanted to know was about Mariette Bosch. And of course, in 1999, we had been involved in the death penalty case relating to Tubasara. We hadn't had such international coverage.
Right.
And so even for the average Motswana, it was like, but what's so special about this case? And of course, the noticeable difference was that Mariette was white. And all the other people who'd been executed were black. And there'd been no focus on them. And there were some people who opposed her being executed, those few who spoke out, because she was a woman, that women shouldn't be executed. But of course our position is we're opposed to the death penalty, whether you're a woman or white or green or whatever. So you had that element, the sort of what appeared to be interest merely because she was white. Then you also had the element where our president clearly articulated a position of sovereignty. Botswana is a sovereign state. We have internal rules. She went through the legal system. High Court, she was legally represented. Court of Appeal, she was legally represented. At no point did she not have a lawyer. It was a lawyer of her choice, etc., etc. And the matter went to the clemency stage.
It was a horrendous shock.
Yes.
Because I came into chambers in the morning and my staff, who had grown quite fond of her, told me that she had been executed. And I said, no, that's not possible. They said, we heard this over the news. She has been executed. And of course I spoke to someone who confirmed that it in fact was the position.
I learned of the execution in the Radio Botswana News Bulletin on Monday morning at 7 o'clock. I was just going to take a shower and then I heard in the news that Mrs. Bosch had been executed on Saturday. And then immediately Mr. Wolmarans called me to say that he has received a call from the prisons department saying that he must attend at prisons immediately because there was something that they needed to discuss with him and that he should attend with his lawyer. So I went to the prisons at 8 and we were called into a room and that's when we were told that she had been executed on Saturday and her belongings were there. They were given to the family.
Yeah.
I was particularly devastated, you can imagine, having been the lawyer, and the family was particularly devastated, mostly the children.
Upon hearing of his wife's execution, Tini flew into an indignant rage. He vowed that he would die to prove Mariette's innocence.
I've made a promise to her that the truth shall be revealed one day. And Mariette, I know that you hear me. I know that you're here with us, with God. I shall keep that promise. And I love you.
One would think that a man so inspired to prove his wife's innocence would be prepared to discuss his case with the television team.
Okay,
let's see if we can get hold of Tini Wolmarans again.
The number's not available. Try again later.
Try again later. This is now the 3rd day that I've tried to get hold of Tini Wolmarans. I don't really know how to defend him.
Tini refused to talk to us because he'd signed an exclusive contract with someone else. He indicated Mrs. Schofield was involved in this deal, partly to recover her costs in the case which he himself could not pay for.